Hey, good morning. How you doing? Are you well? Hope all's well with you. It's just 11 o'clock here in Manchester, UK time, as I've switched on the old live stream. I hope you've had a good Christmas. I know I said this on Sunday View yesterday, but not everybody gets to see or hear Sunday View, I should say, hear it live. So I hope you had a lovely Christmas and it was relaxing and it was revitalizing and refreshing. I'm sure there's a few refreshments here and there. And I hope you're looking forward to 2019. I know some of you won't be. I know things are not easy for everybody at the moment. And I know it's a difficult time for people. A lot of people get depressed at this time of year, just after Christmas into the new year. People get melancholic, if I can say that. They get a bit down in themselves, and particularly if they've got financial problems and they're looking down the barrel of that. So I'm aware of that as well. So I've been there. I've been that soldier. I know all about it. So I'm glad to be back. I enjoyed the Sunday View show yesterday. I couldn't speak during Sunday View yesterday because I did a very amateurish thing. Just before I went on air yesterday morning, I had a few problems. So I left a few screams out of me, a few profanities, and made myself fairly hoarse. It was fairly pathetic, to be honest, because I was here by myself. I was shouting at myself as things were going wrong, but I got on air anyway. So listen, to those of you sending messages there on the side of the page, thanks for sending those messages. Nice to see you all there, Mark and Sean and AU and Linda and Paul and Ricky and Martin. I won't be looking at that all the time, so I've got a few things to talk about briefly before we before I depart, because I'm only going to be with you for about 15 or 20 minutes or thereabouts. The rollout of 5G mobile technology is a major issue in 2019. There's no doubt about that. It's a massive issue. That's something that might leave people with feelings of melancholy and hopelessness and depression, because it seems that no matter what people try to do to raise awareness of it, the UK's press is just ignoring it. And when there are stories about 5G, they're largely, well, in fact, they're exclusively stories talking about how positive it all is and what it's going to mean for business and connectivity. But of course, I believe, as I know many of you believe, that it's going to have a very profound and disturbing effect on our health. I have no doubt in my mind that's absolutely true. And I'll be hoping to bring you new voices, new men and new women who are talking about this in the very early weeks of this new year. It is the 7th of January today. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, if that's all right. I don't want to be talking about things. I don't want to be saying things that I've said over and over and over again. But there are one or two things that I've been talking about recently and in the last year or two, and I just want to very briefly mention them. Of course, 5G is a massive issue for us in the coming 12 months and beyond. There's no doubt about that. But another major issue, I think, let me just put my tablet over there. Another major issue, and I won't say predicted it, because it's not that I've been predicting it. Obviously, because of my background, I've managed to build up a fairly extensive contact book over the years. And there are a number of men and women working within the mainstream media, television and radio, and in the print media that have been very good to me over the years. People I've known for 20 years, really, going back to the mid to late 1990s when I got my start. And these people have been very good at giving me little nuggets of information from within the corridors of the major media organizations. One of the things that I've been speaking about for about 2 years is the desire. We say the system, don't we? We say the establishment, we say the elite, we say the hidden hand, we say those that control things. One of the things that is very much on the agenda is to regulate the independent media in the United Kingdom. This isn't something that I can speak about with respect to any other country in the world, but I can talk about the United Kingdom. The UK's media is governed by the Official Communications Act, which we call Ofcom, which is the regulatory body for the media. It's the media watchdog in the country, okay? Every commercial media organization in the UK, every television and radio station, every newspaper in the country must have an Ofcom license. They must have a license to broadcast, to print, granted by Ofcom. And with the license comes a list of responsibilities and a list of regulations, right? You get that. You're not stupid. I know that. People like me have always been exempt from that because, to put it very simply and to be very, very blunt about me, I'm a completely independent guy who broadcasts daily from a self-contained independent studio, which is based at my home, where I'm speaking to you from now. Independent, it's just me. I produce the program through the day. I get to 5 o'clock, I go on air, I do it. I stream it myself from the same studio, and it's picked up by one or two organizations, Fab Radio being one, and TuneIn.com being another, trigger warning and that. And it goes out, and that's that. And then when it's finished, it's put onto Podomatic, and from there it goes on Spotify and iTunes and all the rest of it, right? And then at some stage in the evenings, I get it on YouTube. So that's what it is. So I'm independent. I don't work for anybody. I don't have a boss. I don't work to a set of editorial guidelines. It's just me. Basically, as an independent operator, I make the decisions for the show. I interview the guests. I invite them on. I do the production. It's just me. So forever and a day, well, since the internet became available, since broadcasting online became possible, guys like me have been exempt. Haven't had to worry about regulation, but that's going to change. And I've been speaking about this for the last couple of years. Like I said, I'm no soothsayer. I'm no Nostradamus. I've had inside information. I've had people telling me for the last couple of years, Richie, coming in 2019, probably in late 2019, the regulatory authority in this country is going to start knocking on the doors of people like you to tell you that you should, and in fact, you must have a license to do what it is that you do. And as I said, in my case, my show is very simple. It's a news roundup followed by a couple of interviews with people whom I find interesting. So that's where we're going with that in 2019. That's a very big thing. And it will have, at least in the UK anyway, it will have, again, not to be using cliches or saying the same things, but I know I use the word profound quite a bit, but it will have a profound effect on the independent content creators in this country like me. Because once it becomes law that you must have a license to broadcast a live internet radio show, it then becomes easier for the regulatory authority to find you in breach of the guidelines that you signed up to in order to get your license. And then it becomes easier to bump you off the air, which is what is coming in 2019, 2020. That's what they want to do. Now, you know me, we've been together quite a long time, you and me. This is not about me. I'm not important. They're not coming after me specifically at all. These people won't have heard of the Richie Allen Show. But there is a big movement, a groundswell within the corridors of power to get this on the agenda in 2019. And that's going to be a big thing in 2019. Another thing I wanted to talk about briefly. Hi to Venus Rising, by the way. How you doing, Venus? And to Blackbird Garden there and Sniggering Sean. You're talking about smart motorways. Yeah. Anybody who's driven in the last 12 months or 2 years in the United Kingdom will have encountered construction on the motorways and signs saying that you're entering a smart motorway, you need to adjust your speed. And these are things which have massive implications for people, for privacy, for people's freedom. And I've no doubt that I'll be talking about smart motorways on the program in the very near future. No doubt about that. Sorry about the light here, by the way. There isn't anything I can do about that. I want to talk a bit about Twitter. Now, I have a Twitter account for the program, and largely I observe it during the live show and I read out comments as they come in. But for the most part, I don't use it very much. I post the podcasts on there, don't I? Sometimes, well, most times after the show. And every now and then I'll see something and I'll retweet it. But by and large, I don't have a lot to do with Twitter. It isn't of much use to the program in terms of the growth of the program anyway. It is useful to me when I'm live on air and people send me a tweet with a comment. That's about the be all and the end all of Twitter. Outside of that, it's of no use to me whatsoever. But it's massive. And I don't think we talk about it enough. We don't talk about Twitter hegemony enough. The dominance of Twitter enough. And I've been thinking quite a bit about this, particularly over the holiday, how Twitter as a platform is not reflecting the views and the opinions of its billions, I suppose. I know it's hundreds and hundreds of millions. Let's say it's more than 1 billion now. I don't know. But it isn't there to connect people and to reflect people's points of view, which is what we were always told it was going to be. And it's what we've always been told that it is. It's there to reflect trends and opinions in society. It isn't. It's being used now, rather than to reflect what's happening, it's now being used to set the agenda. And it's amazing. I was thinking again this morning, it must be a real interesting field of study for anthropologists around the world, men and women in academia. They must be looking at Twitter and the effect it's having on our language, on how we behave, on how we think, on how we interact with one another online. But also, as I said, how it's setting the agenda increasingly. And what's fascinating to me is how the media, but mostly the tabloid media, which still, the tabloids don't any longer, or do not any longer, enjoy the circulation that they might have enjoyed 15, 20, 25 years ago. But they're not dead yet. They still have a great circulation. When you say great, it's still very, very good. They're still selling hundreds of thousands of Daily Mails and The Suns and The Mirror and all that crap. They're still selling hundreds of thousands each on a daily basis. But they've cleverly been able to grow exponentially online. So the Mail online is massive. It's way ahead of the Daily Mirror, I suppose, and maybe it's way ahead of the Sun. But they're doing very well online as well. And Twitter is thriving in the tabloid media because the tabloid media is increasingly generating stories from stuff. I know it isn't a very academic term, is it? Stuff, but from things that happen on Twitter. It's amazing. The amount of times in a week that somebody like me who reads all the papers every day will see a story in the tabloid media about something that happened on Twitter. It's an amazing thing. Again, in the field of anthropology, incredible field to research this. Brand new, what's going on and how it's changing human behavior. And you see that through Twitter storms. Twitter storms are very interesting things. A Twitter storm where people on Twitter or Twitter users go all in on somebody or something, usually in a very negative way, because something was said, something was done, something was shared that has been deemed to be unpalatable or unacceptable. And you see this more and more and more and more and more. What you see more and more and more again, to labor the point because it's important, is the mainstream media reporting on that. And that is not an accident. That's not a naturally occurring thing. That's by design. And it's happening. It's part of an agenda to change the generations coming behind us. I'm 44 now. Not just Generation Z, but Generation X, Generation Y, whatever they are. The children of the 90s, the children of the noughties, to change how they think, how they behave, right? There's been so many of them this year. You know, we've seen companies suspend their advertising campaigns with certain newspapers because Twitter storms said you can't be associated with a certain newspaper because that newspaper has an opinion on migration or whatever. We've seen restaurants changing the names of dishes. Waitrose changing the name of a sandwich last year. We've seen a guy get fired because he made a silly joke about, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are very small examples of how Twitter is changing human behavior and how it's being aided and abetted by coverage of that by the tabloid media. But it isn't accidental. It's an amazing thing. Initially, that led to people imposing on themselves a form of self-censorship. Well, I better not say that, lest that get me into trouble. I better keep my powder dry. I better keep my nose clean. So I won't express that. I'm not sure if that's okay. I'm not sure if it's okay to say that. So that's not new. You know that isn't new. I'm not saying that's new, but that's what it was. Self-censorship. But it's gone beyond self-censorship now. The changes we're seeing in people. Self-censorship is now giving away to virtue signaling. And now virtue signaling is a word or a term that gets used all the time. I use it quite a bit, usually in a very derisory manner on the show during the monologues. And it's become a bit of a cliche. Right? Virtue signaling. And it's become a bit of a joke. But it's not a joke, it's very serious. Because the person who used to self-censor, in other words, to keep quiet and shut up, lest they be annihilated on Twitter, has moved on to being more proactive, looking for opportunities to virtue signal, to signal to the herd, look, I'm lovely, I'm okay, me, I say all the right things, I do all the right things. There's an incredible example of that this morning on BBC Radio 5 Live. Their breakfast show is presented by Nicky Campbell, who's a famous enough Scottish broadcaster, used to do Wheel of Fortune. He used to present for Radio 1 going way back. These days, he can be found co-presenting the breakfast show on Radio 5 with a woman called Rachel Burden. But he also hosts a show called The Big Questions for the BBC, which goes out during the winter. I think it's just come back, actually, on Sunday mornings. After the Mar show. Amazing bit of virtue signaling today. I won't say unnecessary, but completely, to me, it was amazing anyway. Apparently, there's a new virtual reality show called The Greatest Dancer. Now, when I say I'd rather watch paint dry, I'd rather sit at a window that looks onto a brick wall and spend hours watching that than watching shows about dancing. I really mean it. I know you're thinking, Richie, no, we don't. The future Mrs. Allen has no interest in any of that crap, thank God. So we don't watch it. So apparently there's a new show called The Greatest Dancer. And this morning, Rachel Borden mentioned this. Apparently it was on last night. And she said to Nikki Campbell, were you watching it? I was, says Nikki Campbell. And Rachel Borden says, wasn't it incredible? There was a Down syndrome person on there dancing. Apparently there was somebody with Down syndrome was participating in the show. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But Nikki Campbell immediately jumped in and said, I did. I was in bits. I was in absolute bits. Meaning, I was moved to tears. Meaning I was moved to tears. Look at me, I'm a wonderful person. I saw a kid with Down syndrome dancing on a television show and I was moved to tears. Amazing. To which point Borden jumped in to say, yeah, me too, I was moved to tears. Now, luckily enough, and this is not virtue signaling, I've known a few people over the years with Down syndrome. And people with Downs are, well, they're pretty regular people. Until recently, I was using the buses here in Manchester. These days, I don't use the buses. I either run everywhere, or if the journey is any longer, I drive my car. And I used to see a young girl with Downs get on the bus, sit down, play with her, not with her phone, but with her iPod, listening to music, watching out for her stop, getting off. And I remember musing to myself at the independence of people. But the virtue signaling was incredible. I was moved to tears. I wish he had said, Nikki Campbell, when she said, did you see that last night, that kid with Downs? I wish Campbell had the balls to say, yeah, isn't it absolutely fucking crap, isn't it? Trying to elicit an emotional reaction in the audience by exploiting people who are a little bit different. Because that's the real reason the producers have put the kid with Downs in there. The kid with Downs can be the best dancer in the world. I'm sure the kid is. But that's what they're doing. It's pathos. I'll get hammered for saying that now. Now, if I said that, if I was famous and I'm not, and that's something I wanted to talk about, the Twitter storms are always centered around very well-known people or well-known institutions to train everybody else. You see what happens when you say that which we have deemed to be unacceptable. You see that? See what happens? There's no point in doing it to me. I'm nobody important. They can hammer me on Twitter, but not very many people know who I am. So the Daily Mail is not going to cover that. The Mirror is not going to cover that. But they do it to people in the public eye to train them. And as I said, I know I'm jumping backwards and forwards here. People have now moved away from self-censorship, which was, well, I'm going to say nothing, because if I do say something, I'm in trouble. That was yesterday. Today is, I'm going to be proactive. Before anybody can come after me, I'm going to create a record of virtue signaling. Do you see that kid with Down syndrome? I was in bits. I can't even make the sign of the heart. I'm useless. I was in bits. I was moved. And you're going to see more and more and more of that throughout 2019. Facebook is controlling what it is you see. It's controlling the news that you receive. Twitter is keeping everybody in line. It's an amazing thing. And it's progressing at a rate of knots, the impact that it's having on people. I was exposed to it a couple of times last year. Not me. I can say anything I want. Nobody cares because, as I said, outside of my audience, nobody has any idea who I am, so I can say whatever I want. But a couple of times last year, well, more than a couple of times, very interesting men and women that I was really keen to speak to on the program declined the invitation to come on because of things that I had said about Israel. And it didn't matter that I had reassured the potential guest. Well, listen, my criticism of Israel and its treatment of the indigenous rightful people of Palestine has always been fair. It's never been motivated by me hating anybody or, having any, dark thoughts about people or religions or religious views. I just despise what Israel has done. I despise that it's allowed to do it. I despise the Holocaust industry, which I've talked about many, many times, how Israel exploits the Jews that were killed in the period of the Second World War, exploits their memory to enable them to do what it is they do to the righteous people of Palestine. But I'll get people saying, I can't come on. Can't come on, Richie. I can't be associated with that. And I've seen that quite a bit in the last 12 months. People saying, as the Labour Party in England capitulated to Zionism, when Jeremy Corbyn put his head between his legs and refused to stand up to the lies that were being told about him and about some of his colleagues like Ken Livingstone. That's going to get worse in 2019 as well. Virtue signaling, Twitter storms, changing people's behaviour. We had the Labour MP Chris Williamson, didn't we? Only a few weeks ago, come out strongly supporting the right of the blockheads to feature the genius saxophonist Gilad Atzmon at a concert in Islington. Williamson came out and said it's outrageous. It's not political, it's a concert. But then they piled in on Williamson. And just like the bearded Muppet Corbyn, Williamson's balls shriveled. And then he apologized for supporting Gilad Atzmon's right to make money, right to stand and play the sax. He apologized. What's going on when that happens? It's training the minds of younger people. It's having an enormous impact on them, sociological impact on them, on how they think. Yeah, I can't speak about that. Can't. I feel very strongly about that, but better not say anything. In fact, rather than not just say anything, I'm going to look for an opportunity to highlight that I agree with the herd. So I look for an opportunity to talk about Israel in a positive light, or whatever the subject matter might be. Gilad did sneak in and play anyway. He was dressed as Santa Claus and played. So yeah, he did. And right it was that he did play. And he was backed to the hilt by the blockheads, which is an amazing thing. So these are amazing, these are very big issues. Yeah, 5G, but censorship and the regulation of the independent media in 2019, while Twitter as a platform continues to set the agenda, continues to decree what is okay and what isn't okay. These are fairly big challenges, I think, for shows like mine in 2019. And like I said, when Ofcom comes knocking on the door, it's not about me specifically. Like I said, these people, most of them won't have heard of this particular show, right? But that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, look, you need to have a license. You can't be doing this anymore. So we know this. So that's it, really. I've got a really interesting show lined up for you later on. I'm going to be speaking with a man who's not been on for ages. I think it's been nearly 2 years since he was on. He's a real gentleman. He's a professor of, let me get it right. I actually wrote it down because I hate getting it wrong. He's Dr. Alex Scott Samuel, and he's the senior lecturer in public health and policy at the University of Liverpool. He's a smashing bloke, is Alex. And we're going to be talking about the new 10-year plan for the NHS, which we're being told will save up to 500,000 lives by focusing on prevention and early detection. Now, I talked quite a bit about this on Sunday View yesterday. This is far deeper than trying to make the NHS more you're trying to make it work better, to be more efficient. That's the word I was looking for, efficient. It goes far deeper in terms of how far into your lives and my life that these people want to go. Again, I talked about it. If you missed Sunday View yesterday, there were some interesting things on Sunday View. So Alex Scott Samuel will be among the guests. And then I've noticed, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but in the last 3 days, 2 broadsheet newspapers and 1 tabloid newspaper, wait for this, have run articles, have run pieces questioning whether or not anti-vaxxers, as they call them, not only do they represent a threat to everybody else, are they potentially a threat to life? Now, I'm not exaggerating. 2 broadsheet newspapers, 1 tabloid, running stories since the new year, asking questions. Are anti-vax campaigners, do they represent a serious threat to life? It's getting very sinister, right? So I've been listening to some of this, and I've been grabbing some really interesting bits of audio, and I'm going to present to you a very special report in the second hour about what's going on here. So Professor Alex Scott Samuel from Liverpool University will join the program early on, and I'll be reporting on this vaccine. This, again, no coincidence whatsoever. 2 broadsheets, 1 tabloid in the last 6 days, 7 days are going big on, are anti-vaxxers actually a danger to everybody else? Why is that happening now? Well, I've got a very interesting report. I'll be talking about things maybe you haven't thought of before, and we'll do it in an interesting way. So look, it's great to be back. The live show, of course, every Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. UK time, and the Sunday View program, as always, at 11 a.m. UK time on Sunday mornings. We'll go ahead as usual. And this particular thing here, running through a couple of stories in the AM, I want to clean that up and make it more interactive and more viewer-friendly in the next few weeks when I can get the time. It is just May Fain at the moment, meaning myself, it's just myself. So it's difficult for me to sort all that out. I've got software to install, and I want to do that. Right, okay. Right, that's it then. Look, enjoy the rest of your Monday, January 7th. I'm live on richieallen.co.uk, first and foremost on richieallen.co.uk. As you look at your screen, the player is on the left-hand side. You can't miss it. Press play, and there you go. I'm on there. But I'm also on Fab Radio in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv, and TuneIn Radio. I've interviewed Andy Wakefield several times. Those interviews, if they're not on YouTube anymore because they were deleted, they're on podomatic.com. Just look for Richie Allen and Andy Wakefield. Right, have a really good rest of the day. I'm going to try and figure out how to turn this off. I don't know how to turn this off. I could be here. I could be with you all. Oh, there you are. I'll speak to you at 5, right? 5 it is. 5 o'clock. Bye for now. Bye.